Hi, Language Arts. I am so sad that I'm not with you guys today to go over the elements of plot. I hope that this video is something that will be helpful for you and that you guys can use in the future or as you do homework tomorrow, lessons tomorrow. But make sure you have in front of you your Just Once unit packet and a pen or a pencil, preferably a pencil in case you have to erase and kind of come back and go over. Yesterday, you guys talked about the setting, okay, and you should have this filled out. I did send home with your parents or with your home teachers, I sent home a answer key that would help if you were not sure of an answer or if there was something that was confusing to you. Looking at 2, 3, and 4, I see that we are looking at some places in the winter time in the forest. I'm seeing that there is underwater or at the beach in the end of summer. I see a lion cub, so maybe in the safari, and then around dinner time is what I'm seeing here. And of course, you can have something different, and that's okay. But those are just some things I'm seeing for the setting, which does bring us to page 3. So please pull out page 3, and we're going to talk about these 6 parts of the plot mountain. This is called so many things. Throughout the year, I might say, let's make a plot mountain. Let's make a plot diagram. Let's do a plot pyramid. In fact, your success criteria says, let's make a plot pyramid. So anytime that's mentioned, it's going to be this image here, okay? It's going to have a long line that goes up into a point and goes down in another line, okay? So we mentioned it on Monday, but when we read fiction, which is going to be stories that are not based off of real events, can they be realistic? Absolutely, but they're not based on real events. When we read those, or we talked about it, we actually watched a video, and on the video it talked there was 5 elements of kind of storytelling or fiction writing. You have the setting, which we talked about. There is something called conflict, which we will talk about later. Theme, we have characters, and the most important, because the story wouldn't happen without it, is plot, okay? So the question is, what is plot? So in anywhere, you don't have to write this, but if you feel like it will help you, and it might help you for a test down the road, or it might help you for a quiz down the road, anywhere on your page you can write this, that plot is the sequence of events in a literary work, okay? They follow the same sequence of events. Let me give you an example. We actually follow a plot, but it's a nonfiction plot because we're talking about ourselves throughout our days, right? Like when we tell a story to our parents, we usually follow a plot. Your mom and dad may ask you, hey, or your grandparents or your aunt and uncle might ask you, hey, what did you do at school today? And most of the time, if you're not answering, nothing. If you're giving them details, most of the time you start from the beginning and you go to the end, right? Anytime you read a book, whether it's a book that is the K or Chronicles of Narnia, or even if it's a children's book like I have here, I have a million children's books because of my little daughter and son. There's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's because plot follows a sequence of events, okay? So it's always going to have the sequence of events. You can see on your page that there's the sequence of events here, and it goes like this. Exposition. Perhaps you've heard it called the introduction. You have the inciting incident, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution, also called conclusion. That's how every story is. No matter what story you read, whether it's a page and a half or it's 2,000 pages, it's going to have a beginning, middle, and end, and it's going to have the rising action and the falling action and the conclusion. So look at this plot diagram. This is actually, here, let me move my video. This is actually really interesting because look at this part right here. Okay, sometimes when we read, you might be thinking, Ms. Briggs, not everything is just open and shut, and that's okay. We'll talk about this actually when we read the Bronze Bow, but sometimes there's a lot of rising action, which we'll talk about later, and that our stories kind of go like this, and that's okay as long as there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. A exposition, inciting action, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, conclusion. In order to analyze literature, you should become familiar with the plot sequence, plot mountain, plot diagram, plot pyramid, story plot, anything like that. So you are aware of what's happening. Like, what's happening? How can I summarize what's going on if I don't know what's the beginning of the story? So we'll start with the beginning, right? Exposition. Exposition here. I want you to take notes on what the exposition is. The introduction of characters, setting, and the basic situation. Okay, let me read you one. Okay, I have an exposition for you right here. This is called Madeline's Rescue, and I read these books all the time when I was a kid. So it is a kid's book, it's a children's book, but it follows the same sequence. In an old house in Paris that was covered with vines lived 12 little girls in 2 straight lines. They left the house at 9:30, in 2 straight lines in rain or shine. The smallest one was Madeline. She was not afraid of mice. She loved winter, snow, and ice. To the tiger in the zoo, Madeline just said, "Poo-poo." Okay, that is the beginning or the introduction of Madeline's Rescue, right? So we see all of this stuff is happening. This is called the exposition. This is the beginning of the story, the introduction. We are introduced to characters, setting, and the basic situation. Okay, what's basically happening here? Why don't you take a second, pause the video, turn and talk with your partners at your table, and figure out what was the setting. You can come back and listen to the story if you need to. What was the setting? What is the characters? Or who are the characters? Excuse me. What's the basic situation here, right? Biggest thing to understand is characters and setting. Okay. Hopefully, when you've done you have finished your turn and talk, you've kind of discovered that the main character, which would be, or one of the characters in the story, is Madeline, and that the setting is in Paris, and it's about 9:30 when they leave, and they leave in rain or shine. Okay, that's the setting, and that's the characters, the basic introduction. The second point we have, and this is the point that usually is the trickiest part of the whole entire story, but it's the inciting incident. Okay, so we're on number 2, the inciting incident. This is a moment that hooks the reader and sets everything in motion. Okay, this is where the central conflict may be introduced, and we'll talk about conflict later, all right? But this is the central conflict. This is where things are set in motion, right? We know about the characters. We know about, Madeline. We know about her living in Paris, and they leave at 9:30. So here's a little bit more. We have, nobody knows so well how to frighten Miss Clavel until the day she slipped and fell. So we have an inciting incident. We have something that we went from learning about Madeline, and we learned about she lives in Paris. She lives in a house in Paris. They leave 9:30, and we know that she likes to scare Miss Clavel. And then we have that she fell off a bridge. That is what starts the exciting incident for Madeline's rescue. Okay, so inciting incident. what is going to be the thing that sets the story in motion. It doesn't have to be the most exciting part of the story, because it's not. It's not the most exciting thing that happens in the book or the short story or the poem. It's just the thing that gets the story moving. It's like taking your keys and putting it in the ignition and starting the story, your car up, right? That's like an inciting incident. Okay, that moves us to our rising action. Rising action right here. The conflict begins to get more complicated and interesting by adding complications that lead to a climax, right? So things that we look at in this story, and I'm not going to read all of the story because I know it's just a little kid's story, so it might not be interesting. She's fallen off the bridge, but she's rescued by a dog, so that's building on the action, okay? The dog saved her. Then she's kind of put on bed rest, and then they have the dog with them, right? And now they're trying to figure out who's the dog's owner. Okay, the dog is part of their life here. This is all building action here. I know this sounds kind of a little bit boring, but I'm just telling you that we're just part of the rising action is when we're adding things to the story to give it context, to build to the most suspenseful part. Okay, this is the part in any story. It's like when it's the part of the story where maybe the characters are making decisions, right? And you are getting nervous for them. You're like, if you keep making that decision, I know what's going to happen. If you turn that corner, and you open that door, you're going to get scared because somebody's hiding there, you know? So it's building that tension so that you as the reader feel that suspense coming, right? It doesn't have to be scary because not every story is scary, but it is suspense where this is going to all play in to our main character and how our main character is impacted, right? Okay, so we're gonna come to climax. I'm almost to my time, so I'm gonna have to make a new video, but I want to talk about climax with you guys. Number 4, climax. The highest point of action or interest for the main character. That's really important. This is a decision where it can be like, in this book, it's who is going to keep this dog in Madeline's rescue? Who is going to keep this dog? It rescued Madeline. Is Madeline going to keep this dog, or are the other girls going to keep this dog? That's like the climax. It's the highest point of interest. Now, this decision, and it'll make more sense when we talk about conflict on Monday, but this decision is an emotional decision, or it can be a big, choice they have to make. Will, Fred go to Walton School, or will he go to Wilford School? Will Fred eat this cookie, or will Fred eat that cookie? It's an emotional decision that a character has to make, and you as the reader are like, are you going to make this choice or that choice? Very important. Now, inciting incident might be suspenseful. It might be like a lot of action, but it's not the most action or emotional intensity that a character may face, right? It might happen to get this, you start the car, right? And that's an exciting moment when you start the car, but you're driving down that highway, and an emotional decision might be like, oh, am I about to miss my turn, or am I going to stay straight, right? It's going to really determine where the character goes next. That's part of the emotional journey. We'll come back to this in a minute since my time's almost done.